Don't get lost in your thoughts. The truth is not in the mind. The truth is in the fire that burns the mind away. Rumi said this centuries ago, and yet his words still cut through the noise of our lives like a blade of light. Imagine for a moment that every second of your existence is a hidden door, and that this door does not open with logic or with years of study, but with one spark, a spark that sets your entire being on fire. This is not about romance, not about comfort, but about an awakening that takes everything you thought you knew and melts it down into something greater. And before we step deeper, let me ask in Rumi's way, if a candle lights another, does it lose its flame? No, the light doubles. That is how truth works, and that is how love works. If these words strike a chord within you, if they awaken even a tiny spark in your chest, let that flame spread. Subscribe, leave a like, share it further. Not for me, but for the fire itself, so that more hearts can remember the language of their soul. There are forms of love that are soft and kind, that give us shelter in the cold nights of life. But the love that Rumi discovered was not like that. It was not gentle. It was not polite. It did not knock at the door. It broke the door down, lifted him into the storm, and carried him where he never imagined going. Rumi was a scholar, a man of reason, already respected and admired, already surrounded by students, books, and certainty. He thought he understood the world, but the universe had prepared a meeting that would undo everything. On a dusty road, a wanderer appeared. No titles, no authority, no crowd to announce his arrival. Just a man, a dervish named Shams. Yet he was not simply a man. He was a mirror, and when Rumi looked into him, he saw not a person, but a light shining through a human frame. Imagine it. A preacher, secure in his fortress of knowledge, suddenly standing before a storm he cannot explain. Shams did not come to flatter or to argue. He came to break the surface. With one question, one gesture, he cracked the marble wall of certainty around Rumi's mind, and through that crack came the first flood of light. What mattered was not the question itself, but the silence that followed. That silence was not empty. It was alive. It demanded attention. It whispered, "Here ends the road of words. Now step further, step into fire." And Rumi did. From that moment, he no longer saw love as a private feeling between two people. Love became the very essence of existence, the ocean in which all boundaries dissolve. There was no longer me and you. There was only the breath that moved both, the music that turned every loss into a doorway, every wound into an opening for the beloved to enter. Shams did not hand Rumi a book of answers. He handed him a fire, and that fire said, "Give up what you are not." Just as a blacksmith places iron in the furnace to burn away impurities, love placed Rumi in the furnace of longing, stripping away the false layers until only the purest soul remained. To those watching from the outside, it looked like loss, even madness. To Rumi, it was rebirth. His old eyes had seen laws and boundaries, causes and effects. His new eyes saw the beloved in everything, in the breeze through the trees, in the silence between words, in the laughter of children, in the grief of the lonely. Nothing was outside anymore. Everything was inside. This is not simply a story of two men meeting in the 13th century. This is the story of every human heart that dares to let go of control and step into love. Who among us has not felt the sudden pull, the mysterious demand from life to awaken? Who has not been shaken by a stranger's words, or a piece of music, or a line of poetry, only to realize, "I was half asleep, there is more"? That is the call of the same fire, the same love, the same beloved that moved Rumi. And so, when you hear his verses, understand that they are not decoration. They are not meant to comfort. They are meant to set you ablaze. They are meant to remind you that the love you thought you were chasing has always been chasing you. The flame is already here, whispering your name, asking only that you open the door and step inside. Rumi's world had been built on pillars of knowledge. He was a scholar, a jurist, a teacher. His words carried weight, his reasoning was sharp, his presence commanded respect. But when Shams entered his life, those pillars began to tremble. It was not that Shams attacked his beliefs directly. He simply stood there like a mirror polished so clean that it reflected not the outer form, but the inner truth. And in that reflection, Rumi saw something he had never dared to face. His own soul stripped bare of titles, stripped bare of certainty, left only with the raw hunger for God. Shams was not a man of half measures. His presence was like lightning, impossible to predict, impossible to tame. He asked questions that pierced straight into the heart, questions that did not seek answers, but demanded surrender. And Rumi, who had spent his life giving answers, suddenly found himself unable to respond. Every explanation dissolved into silence. Every argument fell apart before it was spoken. In that silence, he felt both terrified and alive, as though standing at the edge of an abyss that somehow called him to leap. This was not friendship in the ordinary sense. This was not a teacher-student relationship. It was a collision of souls. Shams was fire, and Rumi was dry wood ready to ignite. The world around them could not understand. Students whispered, colleagues judged, society recoiled. How could the great scholar abandon his lectures to wander the streets with this unknown dervish? How could a man of such stature bow before a stranger with no lineage, no reputation, no position? Yet Rumi knew. The fire he felt in Shams was more real than the applause of the world. What Shams awakened in him was not dependency, but recognition. He showed Rumi that what he had sought in books was already within him, hidden under layers of intellect and pride. Shams peeled those layers away with brutal honesty. He was not gentle. He was not diplomatic. He was the blade that cuts away what is false, the storm that tears down the old house so that a new one may rise. And through this destruction, Rumi discovered creation. He discovered that beyond the mind's fortress lies an infinite sky. There were nights when they sat together in silence, and that silence spoke louder than any sermon. There were days when their conversations burned so fiercely that time seemed to dissolve, leaving only the flame of presence. Rumi began to change. His sermons grew fewer, his verses grew deeper, his heart grew restless. He was no longer content with the certainty of the mind. He longed for the certainty of the soul, a certainty that does not argue, but simply is. The people around him grew uneasy. They saw the transformation and did not understand. To them, Shams was a threat, a disruptor, a dangerous influence. But to Rumi, he was the very reason he had been born. It was as if all the years of study, all the debates, all the knowledge had been preparing him for this single encounter. And once the encounter happened, everything else fell away like shadows before the sun. Shams did not teach Rumi how to write poetry. He awakened the poetry already waiting within him. He did not explain divine love. He revealed it by living it, by embodying it so completely that Rumi could not help but be transformed. What Rumi had once preached about from a distance became flesh and blood, fire and breath. Love was no longer a concept. It was the air he inhaled, the heartbeat within his chest, the ground beneath his feet. And so, Rumi began to write as he had never written before. Words poured from him not as arguments, but as songs, not as teachings, but as flames. He spoke not to instruct, but to ignite. His verses were born out of the fire of Shams, and through them, the fire spread across centuries, reaching us even now. When you read Rumi, you are not just reading poetry. You are touching the echo of that meeting, the vibration of that fire, the eternal dialogue between a soul and its mirror. And the same mirror waits for you too, perhaps in the eyes of a stranger, perhaps in the silence of the night, perhaps in the very questions that refuse to leave you alone. That is how the beloved comes, disguised, unexpected, unstoppable. The mirror of Shams was given to Rumi once, but the reflection it revealed belongs to all of us. The call is the same, to see beyond names, beyond masks, beyond roles, until only love remains. And when that love speaks, it does not whisper, it roars. When the mirror of Shams cracked open Rumi's heart, something irreversible began. The man who had once walked with the dignity of a scholar now moved with the restless steps of a lover. His words no longer sought to impress or instruct. They sought to burn. The fire within him grew so fierce that it consumed his old identity piece by piece. This was not destruction for the sake of chaos. It was the sacred work of transformation, the way iron becomes steel only after enduring the flames. Rumi had lived by the mind, by the order of knowledge, by the respect of society. But Shams pulled him into another order entirely, the order of love. Love that is not polite, not predictable, not bound by reason. This love demanded surrender. It asked him to let go of his roles, his pride, his certainty, even his name. And so, the Rumi that the world had known began to dissolve. In his place, a new being emerged, not a jurist, not a scholar, but a mystic drunk on the wine of the beloved. Those around him could not understand this fire. They saw his absence from the pulpit, his disregard for convention, his obsession with shams, and they judged him. Some whispered of madness, others spoke of betrayal, claiming he had abandoned his duties, his students, his reputation. But what they called madness was, in truth, awakening. And what they called betrayal was, in truth, fidelity to something higher than the laws of men. Fidelity to the call of the soul. Transformation is never comfortable. To change deeply is to be misunderstood, to be ridiculed, to be feared. Rumi bore that weight, because the flame within him was greater than the voices outside. His heart was drunk with a wine that no one else could taste, and once you have tasted it, there is no going back to water. He wrote not for approval, but for survival, because if he did not give voice to the fire, it would consume him from within. And so the poems poured out, each one a spark leaping from the furnace of his soul. They were not crafted with the cold precision of a writer's hand. They erupted like molten lava bursting through the cracks of the earth. Every line was a confession, every image a wound transformed into light. His words were born not from comfort, but from longing, not from safety, but from surrender. And because of this, they carry the same fire even now, centuries later. This transformation was not only personal, it was universal. By walking through the flames, Rumi showed what every human heart is capable of. He proved that beyond the masks of profession, status, and identity, there is a place where we are all the same, naked before love, stripped of illusions, open to the beloved. That is why his words cross cultures, languages, and religions. They speak to the core of our being, to the part of us that longs for something more than comfort, something more than survival. They speak to the part of us that longs to burn, but let us not romanticize the fire. It is beautiful, yes, but it is also painful. To be transformed by love means to be undone, to lose what you thought was solid, to stand in the ashes of your old self and trust that something new will rise. Rumi felt that pain deeply. The presence of Shams was both ecstasy and agony, joy and torment. For to be near the fire is to feel both its warmth and its threat. And yet, Rumi chose to stay close, even when it hurt, because he knew the pain of love was holier than the safety of distance. So here is the truth that his life whispers to us. If you want to be changed, you must be willing to burn. You must be willing to let go of the comfort of who you think you are, to step into the flames of longing, and to trust that what survives will be truer than anything you have known. That is the fire of transformation. That is the gift Shams gave to Rumi. And through Rumi, it is the gift being offered to us even now. No fire can burn forever without testing the one it consumes. For Rumi, the ecstasy of Shams's presence was only half the story. The other half was the agony of his absence. As quickly as Shams appeared, he also vanished. Some say he left by choice, unable to bear the hostility of those who resented his influence on Rumi. Others whispered darker rumors that he was taken, silenced by the envy and fear of men who could not stand the bond between them. Whatever the truth, one fact remains. Shams disappeared, and Rumi's world was torn apart. The man who had tasted eternity in the mirror of Shams now found himself surrounded by silence. Imagine being given the vision of the sun and then being thrown back into darkness. Imagine breathing the air of paradise and then gasping again in the dust of earth. That was Rumi's grief. His heart, once ablaze, now felt like an empty chamber echoing with absence. And yet, paradoxically, it was in this absence that the fire grew even stronger. At first, Rumi wandered like a madman. He searched the streets. He called Shams's name in every corner. He questioned strangers. He pleaded with the night sky. His students were bewildered, his family alarmed. To them, their teacher had become a shadow of himself, consumed by a love they could neither understand nor accept. But in truth, what they witnessed was the crucible of transformation. The absence of Shams was not the end. It was the doorway to something even greater. For when the beloved disappears from your sight, you are forced to seek him elsewhere. Rumi discovered that Shams had not truly gone. He was no longer outside, but inside. His presence had become inseparable from Rumi's soul. Every memory, every question, every spark of silence became a reminder that the beloved was not limited to a body, not confined to a form. Shams had become the light within the heart, the fire that could not be extinguished. It was in this torment that Rumi's greatest poetry was born. The grief carved deeper channels in his soul, and into those channels poured the wine of divine love. He no longer wrote about Shams as a man. He wrote about Shams as the face of the beloved, the embodiment of the one he had been seeking all along. In losing the presence, he gained the essence. In losing the form, he found the formless. The pain of separation became the path to union. This is the paradox of love. Absence can reveal presence more deeply than closeness ever could. When the one you love is taken from you, every breath becomes a prayer, every silence a conversation, every wound a reminder of the bond that cannot be broken. Rumi's tears watered the roots of his poetry, and from them bloomed verses that continue to intoxicate hearts across the centuries. His loss became our gain. His grief became our inheritance. But let us not soften the edges of this pain. It was real. It was crushing. It was the kind of grief that strips a person of everything, leaving only a hollow cry in the night. And yet, through that cry, Rumi touched eternity. He discovered that longing itself is sacred, that the ache of separation is not a punishment, but a gift, a way of keeping the heart awake, tender, open to the beloved. Without longing, we fall asleep in comfort. With longing, we remain alive to mystery. So when you feel the ache of absence in your own life, remember Rumi. Remember that he too was broken, that he too wandered in despair, that he too tasted the bitterness of loss. But also remember what grew from that brokenness: a river of poetry, a sea of love, an ocean of truth. The pain of separation was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of his union with the infinite, and perhaps it is the same for us. Perhaps the absences we suffer, the silences we endure, the losses we grieve, are not barriers, but invitations. Invitations to discover that the beloved we seek has never truly left. Invitations to realize that the fire we thought depended on another has always been burning within us. From the ashes of separation, a new Rumi was born. The scholar who once measured his worth by books and sermons now poured his soul into verses that defied all boundaries. He was no longer writing to instruct minds. He was writing to heal hearts, beginning with his own. Each poem was a flame, a cry, a confession, a celebration. They came not from calculation, but from overflow, not from theory, but from experience. What had been torn from him outwardly reappeared inwardly as rivers of poetry. Rumi's grief over Shams was unbearable, but it refused to let him fall silent. Silence, yes, but not the silence of despair. Rather, the silence that births song. He discovered that words could carry the fragrance of love, that language, though fragile, could still point to the infinite. And so he began to spin his sorrow into gold. His verses became bridges between the visible and the invisible, between the human and the divine. He no longer sought to control meaning. He surrendered, and the poems came as if dictated by the beloved himself. The language he used was alive with paradox, fire that did not destroy, but purified, wine that did not intoxicate the body, but awakened the soul, wounds that did not kill, but revealed hidden doors to the divine. These paradoxes were not puzzles to be solved. They were windows through which his listeners could glimpse realities beyond reason. To read Rumi was to step into a world where every contradiction was reconciled in love, and the people listened. They could not resist. Even those who had judged him, who had whispered about madness, who had shaken their heads at his obsession, they too found themselves disarmed by his poetry. His words bypassed the defenses of intellect and struck directly at the heart. Whether farmer or scholar, rich or poor, Muslim or Christian, it did not matter. His poetry was not about religion, but about the essence of being human. It spoke to something universal, something that every soul recognized. Rumi himself was surprised by the intensity of his own words. He would often dance as he recited them, whirling in ecstasy, turning his grief into motion, his longing into rhythm. Out of this movement was born the Mevlevi tradition, the whirling dervishes who spin not for performance, but for union. Every turn, every circle, was a symbol of the cosmic dance of love, the endless movement of creation returning to its source. This is why his poetry is not simply read, it is lived. To read Rumi is to be drawn into a current that sweeps you away from the familiar shores of logic and carries you into the ocean of love. His poems do not ask for analysis. They ask for surrender. They ask you to feel, to let the words bypass your mind and touch the deepest part of you. That is why they endure. That is why, even centuries later, people across the world still find themselves trembling at his lines. The birth of Rumi's poetry was not an accident. It was the necessary consequence of love and loss. Without Shams, there might have been no fire. Without separation, there might have been no song. This is the mystery of life. What we think will destroy us often becomes the very source of our creation. Rumi's suffering was not wasted. It became the seedbed of verses that still blossom today, carrying the fragrance of a love too vast to be confined by time. So when you hear his words, remember their origin. They were not written from comfort, but from burning. They were not composed for applause, but for survival. They are the echoes of a man who lost everything outwardly and found everything inwardly. His poetry is proof that from the deepest wounds come the most radiant gifts, and that when life strips us bare, it may be preparing us to sing a song that will never die. As the poems poured out of Rumi, so too did movement. Words alone could no longer contain the fire. His grief and his longing demanded a body, a gesture, a dance, and so he began to turn, slowly at first, then with abandon, circling and circling, as if the ground itself had become an axis connecting heaven and earth. Out of his turning was born the path of the whirling dervishes, a practice not of performance, but of prayer. It was not for show, not for spectacle, but for union. To outsiders, the sight was strange, even unsettling. Here was the great scholar, once dignified in robes and reason, now spinning in circles, eyes half closed, arms lifted as though reaching for something unseen. But to Rumi, this was not madness. It was the most sane thing he had ever done. Turning was surrender. It was letting go of the illusion of control and allowing the body to mirror the movement of the cosmos. The stars turn, the planets turn, the galaxies turn. Why should the human soul remain still? The dance became a ritual. One hand extended upward to receive the light, the other hand turned downward to give it to the world. Feet grounded in the earth, heart open to the sky, body spinning at the center of an invisible circle. Every gesture was symbolic, every step a prayer. To whirl was to say, I am not separate. I am part of the great movement of love that turns everything. I am not here to cling. I am here to flow. Rumi did not invent this movement out of thin air. It was born from necessity, from the need to express what could not be confined to language. When the fire of love is too strong, it must move. The body becomes an instrument, the dance a scripture, the turning a form of remembrance. To whirl is to empty yourself of self, to dissolve into motion until there is no dancer left, only the dance. And in that dissolution, one tastes the beloved directly, without words, without thoughts, without barriers. His followers soon joined him, and together they created a tradition that would endure for centuries. The Mevlevi order, known for their whirling ceremony, carried forward the spirit of Rumi's ecstasy. They understood that dance was not distraction, but devotion, not entertainment, but encounter. Every circle traced on the floor echoed the eternal truth. What begins must return. What separates must reunite. What falls apart must be gathered again in love. This whirling path is more than ritual. It is metaphor for life itself. We too are constantly turning, through seasons, through joys and losses, through beginnings and endings. everything in existence moves in circles. The heart knows this truth even when the mind resists. That is why, when we watch the whirling dervishes, something stirs inside us. The movement reminds us of the pattern we already live, the rhythm that beats beneath all things. For Rumi, the whirl was a way of embodying surrender. He was no longer bound to the respect of scholars, the judgment of society, or the weight of expectation. He was free, free to move, free to burn, free to dissolve into the beloved. The dance was not about escaping the world, but about revealing its true nature. Every spin declared, "This world is not chaos, it is order disguised as motion." Every turn whispered, "Separation is illusion. Everything is already united." And so, through whirling, Rumi taught a lesson deeper than any book could hold. That love is not stillness, but movement, not possession, but release, not conclusion, but eternal return. His path invites us, even now, to spin with the cosmos, to surrender our rigid selves, to let the heart become the axis of a greater dance. For in that dance, the line between seeker and sought, lover and beloved, human and divine, disappears. There remains only the turning, endless, ecstatic, whole. From the whirling arose a vision that dissolved every boundary Rumi had once believed in. As he turned, faster and deeper, he discovered that the axis of the dance was not in his body, but in the heart of existence itself. The whirl revealed a truth that words could barely hold, that everything, absolutely everything, is one. The breath of the lover and the sigh of the beloved, the laughter of a child and the silence of the grave, the rising of the sun and the falling of the night, all of it belonged to a single ocean. Rumi began to see the world differently. Where others saw separation, he saw connection. Where others saw difference, he saw reflection. He looked at the trees and saw them bowing in prayer. He watched the rivers and saw them running toward the same sea. He listened to the wind and heard the voice of the beloved whispering through every leaf. His vision expanded until no religion, no border, no name could contain it. Everything became a sign, a reminder, a verse in the endless poem of love. To many, this was dangerous. For how could a man speak of unity in a world built on divisions? How could he say that every creed, every culture, every people were simply waves of the same sea? But Rumi knew the truth of his own heart. He had seen beyond the veils. He had tasted the wine that does not divide but unites. He had walked through fire and found that, on the other side, there is no you and me. There is only we. There is only one. This vision did not make him naive. He knew the world was full of pain, conflict, injustice. But he also knew that beneath those storms lies a still ocean, unbroken, eternal. He did not deny the storms. He simply refused to mistake them for the whole truth. The unity he spoke of was not fragile, not dependent on agreement or peace. It was deeper, the kind of unity that survives wars, outlives empires, and waits patiently beneath every heart, no matter how hardened. It was this vision that made his poetry timeless. He could speak to a Muslim praying in Kenya, a Christian monk in the desert, a Hindu mystic on the banks of the Ganges, and centuries later to a reader in New York, London, or Tokyo, and each would feel the same fire. Because love is the language that all souls understand. Love does not require translation. It leaps across barriers the way flame leaps across dry wood. Rumi's ocean of unity teaches us something vital, that the divisions we cling to are illusions. We say, mine and yours, us and them, but in truth, everything belongs to the same source. The lover is not separate from the beloved, the seeker not separate from the sought, the question not separate from the answer. To recognize this is to awaken. To live this is to be free. And yet, unity is not a concept to be grasped by the mind. It is an experience to be felt by the heart. That is why Rumi turned, why he sang, why he wept. He knew that logic could not contain the ocean. Only love could. Only surrender could. And in surrender, he discovered the truth that all mystics whisper: you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the ocean in a drop. So when you read his words, let them not be just poetry. Let them be a mirror. Let them remind you that the longing in your chest, the ache you sometimes cannot name, is the call of the ocean itself. You are not separate. You never were. The fire of love does not burn to destroy. It burns to reveal what has always been true, that all is one, and all is love. After the fire of love and the vision of unity, Rumi's gaze turned inward. He understood that the true pilgrimage was not across deserts or mountains, but within the secret chambers of the heart. He had once believed that God was to be found in books, in teachings, in the approval of scholars. But the silence of shams, the whirling of the body, the poetry of longing, all pointed him to a new truth. The beloved was never far. The beloved was closer than breath, closer than the pulse in the wrist. Rumi began to see the heart as a hidden garden, locked behind walls of fear, pride, and distraction. Most people spend their lives outside those walls, gathering knowledge, possessions, achievements, never realizing that the treasure they seek is already inside. The inner journey demands courage. It asks us to face the shadows we avoid, the wounds we hide, the loneliness we deny. But beyond those shadows lies a light so radiant that it makes every step worthwhile. He often spoke of polishing the mirror of the heart. Just as a mirror grows dim when covered in dust, so too does the soul grow clouded by anger, greed, envy, and fear. The work of the inner journey is not to add more, but to remove, to wipe away what is false, to scrape off what does not belong. When the mirror is clean, it reflects the face of the beloved clearly. And then, the seeker discovers that what they longed for was always present, waiting behind the veil of the self. This is why Rumi urged us to stop searching outside and to begin searching within. He said, "Why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open?" The prison is the mind that clings to labels and illusions. The open door is the heart that dares to surrender. To walk the inner journey is to step through that door, to move from noise into silence, from distraction into presence, from separation into union. But this path is not easy. The ego resists. The mind protests. The world pulls at us with endless demands. That is why Rumi used images of breaking, burning, dying, not to frighten, but to remind us that transformation always requires sacrifice. Something must be left behind. The false self must dissolve so that the true self can emerge. Like a seed that must break open to release the flower, the soul must allow itself to be cracked so that the beloved can bloom within. And yet, despite the difficulty, the inner journey is the only journey worth taking. For what good are riches if the heart remains empty? What good is success if the soul remains thirsty? What good is knowledge if it does not lead to love? Rumi discovered that to walk inward is to find the source of all joy, the spring that never dries, the fire that never dies. It is to discover that God is not an idea, not a distant ruler, but the very essence of our being. The more Rumi traveled inward, the more he realized that everything outside mirrored the inner world. The battles he once saw in society were reflections of the battles within himself. The peace he sought in prayer was the peace of reconciling with his own heart. He began to teach that to change the world, one must first change within. To heal others, one must first heal oneself. To love another, one must first love the beloved within. This inner journey is not reserved for mystics or poets. It is the birthright of every human soul. Each of us carries a secret chamber where the beloved waits. Each of us has the capacity to polish the mirror, to clear away the dust, to let the divine light shine through. The question is only whether we will dare to begin, whether we will have the courage to turn inward, to face the silence, to listen to what our soul has been whispering all along. Rumi's life became a living testimony to this truth. His outer world changed. He lost shams, he gained followers, he became a legend. But the real revolution was within. He discovered the kingdom that cannot be taken away, the union that cannot be broken, the love that cannot be lost. And in his verses, he invites us to make the same discovery. The journey is not far. It is as close as your own heart. Step inside, and you will find the beloved waiting with open arms. As Rumi journeyed deeper into the garden of his own heart, one truth rose above all others. Divine love is the greatest power in existence. Not the love that clings, not the love that fears, not the love that seeks possession, but the love that frees, that expands, that dissolves the self into something infinite. For Rumi, this love was not a metaphor. It was the very substance of reality, the current beneath every river, the flame within every star, the heartbeat of the universe itself. He discovered that divine love does not ask for conditions. It does not say, "I will love you if," or "I will love you when." It loves without measure, without reason, without end. And once you taste it, nothing else satisfies. The pleasures of the world lose their flavor. The praises of people lose their charm. The fears of the ego lose their grip. Everything that once seemed important falls away because the soul has found its true food. Rumi often spoke of this love as wine, not the wine that dulls the senses, but the wine that awakens them. To drink of it is to become drunk with clarity, intoxicated with truth. It is to stumble not into darkness, but into light. And yet, this drunkenness is not disorder. It is the highest order, the order of the soul finally aligned with its source. Those who have tasted this wine are misunderstood by the sober-minded, but they carry a joy that no words can contain. Divine love, Rumi realized, is also a fire. It burns away illusions, melts the false self, and forges the soul into gold. At first, the fire feels dangerous, even unbearable. It consumes everything we cling to, our pride, our certainty, our sense of control. But once the burning is complete, what remains is indestructible. The soul emerges purified, radiant, untouchable by fear or despair. The fire does not destroy us. It reveals us. This love is not passive. It is not content with half-hearted devotion. It demands everything. It asks for the whole of you, your joys and your sorrows, your hopes and your wounds, your strength and your weakness. Nothing can be held back. But in giving everything, you lose nothing. Instead, you gain the only treasure that cannot be stolen: union with the beloved. Rumi's poetry became the vessel of this discovery. His words were not about love, they were love itself, woven into syllables, carried on breath. He did not write as an observer describing an idea. He wrote as a lover crying out from the depths of ecstasy and longing. Each verse was a confession of surrender, each metaphor a torch lit in the darkness. And because his words were born of direct experience, they carry the same power even now, awakening the spark of divine love in those who read them. But what does this mean for us? It means that the love we seek in people, in success, in pleasures, is only a shadow of the greater love. Every longing we feel, every ache of the heart, every hunger that nothing seems to satisfy, all of it points to the same source. We think we are searching for approval, or comfort, or belonging. In truth, we are searching for the beloved, and the beloved is searching for us. This love is not distant. It is not waiting at the end of a long road. It is here, now, in every breath, in every heartbeat, in every moment of stillness. The challenge is not to find it, but to recognize it, to trust it, to let it burn away the veils that keep us blind. When we do, we discover what Rumi discovered, that divine love is not one part of life. It is life itself. Everything else is commentary. So when you hear his words, let them remind you of your own longing. Let them awaken the thirst that nothing in this world can quench. Do not fear that thirst. Do not try to silence it, for it is the voice of the beloved calling you home. Drink deeply, burn completely, surrender fully, and you will find yourself held in the embrace of the only love that lasts forever. Rumi's discovery of divine love did not mean a life free from pain. On the contrary, he came to see suffering as the very material of transformation, the raw ore that love refines into gold. He knew loss, he knew longing, he knew the sting of betrayal and the heaviness of grief. Yet he also knew that within each wound lies a hidden gift, a doorway that opens when everything else seems to close. For him, suffering was not a curse, but an alchemy, a process that could transmute despair into wisdom, sorrow into song, wounds into windows for light. He often spoke of the reed flute, cut from its bed, hollowed out, emptied of its heart. Only then can it sing. So too with the soul. Only when it is hollowed by loss, only when it is emptied of illusion, can it become an instrument for the music of the beloved. Our cries, our tears, our brokenness are not signs of failure. They are the sound of the reed being played. They are the evidence that love has entered and the melody is being born. This is the paradox Rumi embraced. The very things we try to avoid, heartbreak, loneliness, struggle, are often the very things that awaken us. Pain shakes us out of our sleep, pulls us out of our illusions, forces us to face the truth we would otherwise ignore. Without pain, we grow complacent. With pain, we become seekers. We begin to ask questions that matter. We begin to look for a love that cannot be lost. Rumi did not romanticize suffering. He knew how heavy it can be. He wept, he wandered, he grieved. But he also discovered that when suffering is offered to the fire of divine love, it is transformed. It becomes fuel for the soul's journey. Just as a blacksmith needs heat to shape the metal, so the soul needs the heat of struggle to shape its destiny. Without it, we remain hard and unformed. With it, we become flexible, radiant, alive. He taught that the wound is the place where light enters, not in spite of the wound, but through it. The pain does not block the beloved. It reveals the beloved. When we stop resisting, when we stop clinging to how we think life should be, suffering becomes a teacher, whispering lessons that no book could contain. It teaches humility, It teaches patience. It teaches compassion. It teaches us that we are not in control, and that surrender is not weakness, but strength. This teaching remains as urgent today as it was in Rumi's time. In our world, we are trained to hide pain, to numb it, to rush past it. But Rumi reminds us to pause, to listen, to honor it. He invites us to see suffering not as an enemy, but as a companion, a guide sent to lead us closer to love. Every tear can water the garden of the heart. Every loss can open a gate to the infinite. Every difficulty can polish the mirror of the soul until it reflects the beloved more clearly. The alchemy of suffering is not a quick process. It requires patience, trust, and surrender. It requires us to stay with the fire even when it feels unbearable. But Rumi assures us, what emerges will be worth it. Just as the darkest night is followed by dawn, just as winter gives way to spring, so too does sorrow prepare the ground for joy. The deeper the wound, the greater the capacity for love. The more intense the fire, the brighter the gold. So when life breaks you open, when grief floods your soul, when pain seems too heavy to bear, remember Rumi's words. Remember that you are not being destroyed. You are being transformed. The beloved is carving you, shaping you, hollowing you into an instrument for his song. Trust the alchemy. Let the fire do its work. For out of your suffering will come a music more beautiful than you can imagine. The music of a soul that has learned to sing with the voice of love. As the fire of love refined him and the alchemy of suffering shaped him, Rumi discovered a freedom no chains could hold and no authority could take away. This was not the freedom of doing whatever the ego desired. It was a deeper liberation, freedom from the ego itself, freedom from the endless craving for recognition, from the fear of loss, from the illusions of control. In surrendering everything to the beloved, he found that he lacked nothing. What the world could give or take no longer ruled his heart. For most of his life, Rumi had carried the weight of titles, expectations, and reputation. He had been the scholar, the preacher, the authority figure. Every step he took had been measured, every word weighed by those who looked up to him. But in the embrace of divine love, all of that fell away. He no longer needed to be anything other than a lover. In that simplicity, he discovered a joy that surpassed every honor, a peace that outlasted every achievement. Freedom, he realized, is not found in resisting life, but in flowing with it. Like the whirling dervish who turns with the rhythm of the cosmos, the free soul does not fight the current. It surrenders to it, knowing that the current itself is the beloved's will. To resist is to suffer needlessly. To surrender is to be carried effortlessly, even through storms. This is the paradox of freedom. It comes not from control, but from trust, not from grasping, but from releasing. Rumi's freedom was contagious. Those who came near him felt it. They saw a man who had lost everything outwardly, his teacher, his reputation, his old identity, and yet radiated joy as though he had gained the whole world. They saw a man who could laugh through tears, who could dance in grief, who could speak of union while standing in the fire of loss. And they wanted to know his secret. His secret was not complicated. It was love. To love without fear, without demand, without condition. That was the essence of freedom. In his poetry, he compared the soul to a bird trapped in a cage. The cage is the ego, the false self with all its fears and desires. The bird longs for the sky, but it clings to the bars as though they were safety. Only when it dares to let go Does it discover that the cage was never locked? The door was open all along. The sky was always waiting. The freedom of the soul is the courage to fly, and yet, this freedom does not mean isolation. It does not mean abandoning the world. On the contrary, the free soul becomes more engaged, more compassionate, more alive. Because when you are no longer bound by fear, you are free to love fully. When you are no longer enslaved by ego, you are free to serve others without expectation. When you no longer need the approval of the world, you are free to give your gifts without hesitation. True freedom is not withdrawal, but participation. Participation without chains. Rumi lived this freedom openly. He whirled in public, sang his verses without shame, welcomed strangers without judgment. His home became a sanctuary for seekers of every background, every faith, every path. He embodied the truth that the soul is not bound by labels or identities. It is bound only by love, and love breaks every chain. This freedom is not something unique to Rumi. It is the destiny of every soul. We were not born to live in cages of fear and illusion. We were born to fly in the sky of love. But the cage will not open itself. We must dare to step out, to trust the wings we have been given, to surrender to the wind of the beloved. When we do, we will discover what Rumi discovered, that freedom is not something to achieve in the future. It is here, now, waiting in the heart that dares to love without restraint. So let us learn from him. Let us polish the mirror, endure the fire, embrace the longing, and then let us fly. For the soul was never meant to crawl. The soul was meant to soar. Rumi's life was a journey through fire, through grief, through surrender, through ecstasy. From the day Shams appeared and broke his world apart, to the nights of longing that carved poetry from his soul, to the whirling that turned his body into a prayer, he discovered one truth again and again. Love is the beginning, love is the path, and love is the destination. Everything else is illusion. Everything else fades. Only love remains. He showed us that divine love is not reserved for mystics or saints. It is the hidden heartbeat of every soul. The ache you feel when you lose someone, the hunger that nothing in this world can satisfy, the joy that comes uninvited when you hear a song or see the sky at dusk. All of it is the beloved calling. Love speaks in whispers, in silences, in tears, in laughter. We spend our lives searching for it outside, when all along it has been burning inside. Rumi invites us to stop running, to stop clinging to the cage of the ego, to let ourselves be broken open by longing, to allow suffering to refine us, not destroy us, to trust the fire, to whirl with the stars, to surrender to the ocean. In every verse, in every metaphor, in every cry of his poetry, he is saying the same thing. Come closer. Do not be afraid. Step into the flame. You will not be consumed. You will be revealed. His message is as urgent now as it was in his time. In a world divided by fear, by hatred, by illusion, his voice calls us back to unity. He reminds us that we are not strangers, not enemies, not separate beings adrift in chaos. We are waves of the same sea, sparks of the same fire, notes of the same song. When we remember this, we are free. When we forget, we suffer. The choice is always before us, to live asleep in fear or awake in love, and perhaps that is why his poetry endures. Because deep down, every soul knows it was made for this love. Every soul longs to return to the source. Every soul recognizes the truth in his words. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. To live by this truth is to live fully, to die before death, to be reborn into a life where everything is sacred. So here, at the end of his story, the beginning of ours begins. The call of the beloved is not distant. It is here, in this moment, in your own heart. Do not wait. Do not delay. The door is open. The flame is lit. The beloved is whispering your name. Step inside and discover that what you have been seeking has always been seeking you. And if these words stir something within you, if they awaken even the faintest spark, let that spark spread. Share it. Keep it alive. As Rumi said, a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. So subscribe, leave a like, pass the flame onward, not for me, but for the love that flows through us all, the love that never ends, the love that is waiting to turn the whole world into light.